Nothing is more important to the success of a startup than the first 10 engineers you hire. That's why I started First 10. Hi, I'm Boris Epstein, CEO of First 10, and with me is my colleague,
Alexis Munger. Hi. At First 10, we work with early founders to help build early engineering teams.
And this is the First 10 podcast, where we bring you valuable insights on building early engineering teams from all sides of the equation. Engineers, founders, even investors. On today's episode of the First 10 podcast, we're talking to Sailesh Ramakrishnan. What a neat conversation.
Totally.
Sailesh is on a different level. I felt like we were getting this, glimpse into a global view of startups.
Yeah.
Right? Sailesh leads Rocketship, which is essentially built a technology that evaluates the entire world's startup information to be able to surface up the best early startups.
Yeah.
That's insane, right? And so how cool is it to hear his perspective on what's going on in the world of startups, right? What's happening in different parts of the world and the different domains, and how cool is that?
Yeah, I could listen to him talk about that all day long. I think what makes him so fascinating to listen to is he not only does he have his eye on the future, but I think he's really good at that because he's got a lot of context and a lot of background and history in tech, and I think that probably helps a lot when you understand where they came from. You can see better where they're going, and I think his insights are really, really awesome and fascinating.
100%. From working on the Mars Rover with NASA to building billion-dollar startups, and now steering the data-driven ship at Rocketship VC, Sailesh's journey is packed with insights for anyone looking to build a game-changing company. He's not just an investor, he's a builder, a thinker, and someone who deeply understands the power of a stellar engineering team. So buckle up as we explore Sailesh's incredible career path and uncover the secrets to assembling a team that can launch your startup into orbit. Sailesh, welcome to the First 10 podcast.
Thank you so much for your kind words of introduction, Boris. A pleasure to be here.
Very, very excited to be here. We go back. So this is a decade-ish in the making?
Almost, yeah. I think we met almost 2009, 2010, something like that.
Back in the day. Also very, post great financial crisis, very interesting time in the, tech mega eras. So jumping right into it. So you worked on the Mars Rover. Curious, what's something about Mars that most people don't know about?
Well, I think the simplest answer is it's a very, very hostile environment. Not just the climate, as in when the sun's on, it gets really hot, but when then it's night, it gets really, really cold. So there's the range of temperatures because there's no atmosphere to protect the planet like we have here on Earth. The other part of it that makes it incredibly sort of hostile is just that material on which the surface is incredibly abrasive. I don't know if you've had a chance. I think there are several images online about the Mars rover's wheels literally have ground out into holes. And these are solid metal wheels, right? And they have literally been there are holes in them because that material is so sharp and abrasive and so on. So it's an incredibly hostile space. And so having anything work there, especially work there without breaking down, without having any issues for years on end, is an incredible feat of both engineering as well as a lot of careful human skill and management that goes on here on Earth to make sure that this amazing vehicle that we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars to send to Mars stays safe and is producing amazing science for us.
Wow, that's interesting. I'm curious, given how hostile it is on Mars, what do you think of people who hope to create a civilization there one day? Do you think that's even possible given what you know?
I think it is certainly possible. So the only reason why I can say that reasonably confidently is there are somewhat similar places here on Earth. I mean,
yeah.
The northernmost wilds of Canada, you still find people living there, right?
True.
And the tallest mountains in the Himalayas, you still find people living there. So people have their ingenuity and they manage to find a way to to live, survive, and sometimes even thrive in these what one would think are completely inhospitable places.
Yeah.
But I think the magic of being in a different planet, far away from the home planet, I think is something that really spurs the imagination of a whole generation of explorers. And I think just that they would be willing to put up with pretty much any obstacle or any inconvenience you would put in their way in order to have that one experience of being able to live on a different planet and see the whole solar system from a very different perspective.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Very cool.
That's incredible. Yeah, my imagination is kind of starting to open up as you were just talking about it. It kind of brings you back to like the little boy, little girl that kind of thinks about the world. It's pretty incredible.
Absolutely, and I think this is the human feature that I think separates us from other living things on Earth. Right? Many things on Earth go through their lives, but human beings are one of the few species that have that innate curiosity of knowing, wanting to know what the rest of the world, the rest of the universe looks like, and what it would be like to live here, there, or anywhere else. And so that's what makes us who we are. I think it's a fundamental aspect of our nature.
Yeah,
I love that. So we'll definitely be coming back to talking about Mars. But I'm curious about Kosmix. Kosmix was a bit under the radar, and then Kosmix was acquired by Walmart. So you were the first engineer at Kosmix. Being the first engineer, seeing the acquisition, tell us about what you guys built at Kosmix and what was so special about it that a company of Walmart stature wanted it.
Well, absolutely. Just one quick correction, though. I was one of the first engineers, not the first engineer.
One of the first.
Because the thing to note there is it was a company built by engineers. All of us were engineers. All of us were computer scientists. And so it stemmed from a very simple premise. All of us think of technology as something that should help humans. It shouldn't be something that gets in the way of humans.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we had noticed for a while, this is now 2004, 2005, is that Google had done an amazing job of search, right? The whole web was growing so fast, and the only way to find something on this very, very vast ocean of information is to search for it. And Google was one of those portals by which you could accomplish that. But what one started realizing as one dug into how people use Google is that if you're looking for a lot of information about something, let's say your child is a little bit sick and has a cough, you're not just going to say, my child has a cough, right, on Google. Because if you did it at that time, you would get 100 million links and your first page was 10 very good links, but it wouldn't actually help you in the sense that you have to click on each one of them. And then maybe some of them will have like a symptom checker or this or that or the other. And then slowly you'll figure out that you have to keep changing your query in order to find as much information about what it is you're looking for. So what was happening was we as humans were learning to use this tool, but this tool wasn't giving us all the things we needed. We had to work with it in order to get all the answers. So, my fellow founders and I, when they had started Kosmix and I joined them, the thing we wanted to do was we wanted to understand what the human was asking, understand that context, and offer them all that information in one go, right? It's almost like an encyclopedic view of what it is you were looking for, but specific to your query. So for, again, taking that example of your child has a cough, we maybe would offer you information about what are the most common reasons why your child is having a cough. What are some remedies, whether there's medications or whether there's therapies, whether there's treatments you could do, what you should be worried about, what you should or shouldn't do. Almost a 360-degree view of that query and offer all that information up front so that you're not constantly, searching again and clicking links and spending hours and hours. In fact, it was a very common trend to talk about how much research you would do on Google on those days. And that was exactly what we wanted to change. We wanted to, for these, what are called informational queries, change the way in which the internet or Google or any other tool would offer information to you. And that's what Kosmix does. Now, that general concept required a lot of pieces to come together. First and foremost, you had to gather all the information that is currently online, right? The entire World Wide Web. The next thing you had to do was understand the context around this query. What does this human want, right? What is their intent? What are they looking for? Are they looking for a specific answer? Are they looking for a generic answer? And is it a health query? Is it something to do with sport? There are many, you take the simple example of the word jaguar. Is it the animal? Is it the sports team? There's so many ambiguities. So you need to understand that context. And then having understood the context, having collected all the information from the web, you had to create that page dynamically to answer that question. And that's what Kosmix did. Now, all of what I said was pivoting around the one thing that the human was doing, which was their query. But you can almost immediately start seeing the parallels from there. What if instead of their query, you were looking at a personality, or in the case of Walmart, a product? Now you would find out everything you needed to know about the product. What is its price? What are its technical specifications? What are its reviews? Maybe there are user videos. Maybe there are complaints. Maybe there is a government recall on that product. Is there a newer version of the product? What are some other potential competing products? There's so much information that you can create around this one product. And that's exactly what the human would want, right? When they are interested in a product, they're trying to make a decision, a purchase decision. And they want to make the most informed decision at that point. And that requires a lot of this information. So again, we were trying to make the entire task of finding this information way easier. And this is exactly one of the reasons Walmart acquired. But it's not the only reason Walmart acquired. The other, even perhaps somewhat more important reason, I think, which developed over time, was Walmart was in an active competition with Amazon on the online space. And the reason why Amazon was leading over Walmart was Amazon was a tech-first company. It started as a technology company. Walmart existed, many years before then as a retailer. So they were a retailer-first company, not a technology-first company. And in order to effectively compete against Amazon, they needed to really up their technology game. And we were, at that time, as Boris was saying, one of the foremost tech teams out there who had a very deep understanding of how commerce works. So when we were acquired by Walmart, we actually created a brand new entity within Walmart. It was called Walmart Lab. And it was going to be that experimental area of Walmart where we would develop all this new and amazing, cool technology that would allow Walmart to compete effectively with Amazon. And so that's perhaps a very descriptive and long answer to the question, what was Kosmix and why were we acquired by Walmart?
The way that you're talking about it too, and I'm remembering when I first got into recruiting, and that was like the first thing that I learned about is the Kosmix engine. And at that point, they were already acquired by Labs. But the way that you're talking about search, I'm just curious, like, could you have, like, now what we're looking at with OpenAI and ChatGPT and the way search is kind of shifting directions now, could you have predicted that back then? Did you think it would go that direction even like when y'all were first building out Kosmix?
Oh, we absolutely did. In fact, one of the most interesting things was after our acquisition, we had a lot of friends at Google. We had a lot of friends all over, right?
Yeah.
And they were like, you guys were ahead of your time. We used to look at you and copy features from what Kosmix was building into Google search.
Yes.
They had this thing called a Google Knoll, which was a knowledge unit, which was exactly a mini Kosmix page for a particular topic. And so we saw this trend. We saw that this is no longer a way by which the system would make you work, but the system had to work for you.
Yeah.
And what we are seeing today with OpenAI and several of these other search engines is not only is the system working, but it's working in a much more convenient interface. You're no longer looking at a box where you have to figure out how to ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
You just ask it naturally. And it's almost like having a conversation with an expert. And so where we didn't actually so much predict that was the eventual direction and this was how the technology would go, this is what we wanted to accomplish when we started Kosmix, right? We wanted a way by which answers would be provided to you without you having to figure out how to make this system work.
Yeah.
Contrary to many people who are kind of just introduced to AI, just introduced to ML, ML was, core technology to what you guys were, building at Kosmix. Is it? It must be interesting from your lens to had such hands-on experience with it and now see the breakthroughs that we're seeing with AI. Talk to us about that.
In fact, that's a very insightful question because oftentimes many people think that this tremendous explosion that happened, 3 years ago, just came out of nowhere. And I don't want to take anything away from the accomplishment of those research scientists at OpenAI. But for us, the set of people who have been in this field, this has been, in its time coming. I mean, again, the history after the fact, people realize the original paper on which OpenAI was based was a 2017 paper, right?
Yeah.
And the work that went into that 2017 paper has been going on for another 20 years before that. So this has been a natural progression of evolution of these kinds of technology. But what was super exciting and what was creditful for what the OpenAI folks did was they basically said, look, most people thought adding more data to these training models would only cost a lot more money in terms of computation and not necessarily get you the result. That's what people thought. They didn't know it, but they thought that. And the reason why they thought that was before all of this happened, they had this yearly competition where they had some benchmarks for this whole process of natural language processing and understanding, where each year those benchmarks were being improved, but they were not being improved significantly. You were adding maybe 1%, 2%, 3% improvement in your accuracy of how these things were working. So nobody thought they were at the cusp of an enormous big transformation by just putting more data to work. But that's what the OpenAI folks did. They basically said, why not? Why not, instead of doing 5 million, 10 million documents, why not give it 100 million, 200 million documents? It was going to cost them, $20 million to train that model.
Yeah.
But let's take that risk. And to their credit, they took that risk and the results are out there for everybody to see. That's the aha moment where not even they themselves could have predicted that outcome. So while the development of the technology was all there, just that one aspect of taking that risk of more data is what transformed the entire game significantly. Now everybody thinks, oh, that's obvious. We should have put a lot more data in. But no, funnily enough, even 20 years ago, there was a big sort of dialogue between the folks at Google and us at Kosmix, where we had actually said, look, we believe more data will always win over better algorithms, because data has the richness of all the information that is out there in the world. And algorithms are needed to extract that, but always more data will help. But even we couldn't have predicted the amount of data that was needed to make that amazing transformation happen.
Yeah.
Wow. What an incredible time must be to be in venture, having described what you just described and what an explosion that must have created for, startups and for opportunity. And we see it, day in and day out with the startups that we work with. But talk to us about Rocketship. What motivated you to get into venture? What are you seeing out there in the world? So, talk to us about Rocketship.
Absolutely. One thing that I want to be sort of pretty clear on is, like I said, through this experience from those Kosmix days to when we started Rocketship, one thing became very clear to me, both personally as well as my fellow partners. We love startups. We love that 0 to 1 transformation. And that is one thing that we are all personally very, very excited by. If we are not building it ourselves, we want to be associated with people who are doing that kind of building. Right? And so we knew we were going to do something in and around startups, whether it be founding them, supporting them, or investing in them. And so that's where we started with, okay, we need to do something with startups, but other people had done investing before. And so how would we do it differently was the question we asked us. And one of the inspiration points was the fact that in the last 30, 40 years, there's this whole sub area of investing in public markets called quant investing, where companies like Renaissance Technologies and Two Sigma, they come up with like fundamentally algorithmic way of investing, and they were making billions and billions of dollars very, very successfully, to a point where today there is almost no trading platform on Wall Street that does not have a quant strategy associated with it. So it changed the entire way of investing, but it added on a new way, right? It didn't disrupt the old way as much as it added a new way of investing. And so we thought maybe that's what we could do. We were certain that humans were still very important in making those decisions and finding those startups to invest in. But what if there was a differentiated way in which it allowed us to get an edge? So this was one more arrow in our quiver. And so with that inspiration is where we started Rocketship. And we felt we were also very uniquely qualified to do that, because we were data scientists, we were computer scientists, we were multiple time founders ourselves. We had gone through this journey ourselves. So we started collecting as much data as we could get access to and started training some models. And our goal was to find what we think were going to be what we call outlier companies that are standing out or have the potential to stand out. We would then reach out to these companies, talk to them, validate that our algorithms were onto something when they identified them, and then make investments. At the time we started, there was literally hardly anybody attempting this approach. We were one of the first. And we ourselves had to learn how to take advantage of this opportunity in order to build a venture fund. So we were very excited to see that this created a very new, but also very successful way of investing. We became a global investor. I mean, today we manage over 250 million and across these three funds, and we have investments in 14 different countries. We have investments in 20 different sectors. And we're able to accomplish all of that from Silicon Valley. So this is truly taking advantage of an enormous technological shift that was happening and applying it to venture. It's also a very exciting way of doing investments because it allows you on any given day to talk to some amazing startups doing many, many different things. I could be talking to a startup in the morning that does logistics and supply chain. In the afternoon, could be talking to a company that is producing artificial meat. And, by the end of the day, could be talking to a generative AI company that is going to completely revolutionize coding. All that in the same day. And the other secret to this is we need the right people to have built this fund. So my fellow partners, Anand, Venki, Madhu, and myself, all four of us embody this culture. We are all computer data scientists. We are all multiple time entrepreneurs. We have built companies. And it's this right mix that is needed to build a fund like ours. And so Rocketship is a data-driven quantitative fund that invests globally in some of the best, most outlier companies out there. And the success is in the numbers of outliers we find on a daily basis. So we are very excited that we have both discovered and successfully taken advantage of a very differentiated way of investing.
That's awesome. I have to ask this question. The name Rocketship, is that a nod to some of the, your prior experience working with NASA and the Mars Rover?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So I got the privilege to name the fund, and so I picked Rocketship because I still wanted to have some association with things that go to space.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's also a much more simpler explanation why the name works really well. Because I think the kinds of companies that we want to invest in, they're going to be outlier companies, right? They're going to be stand out. And in one way, people think of them as rocket ships because there's that inflection curve and they look like a rocket ship. They're taking off, right? And that's when we want to invest in it. So in some sense, we backed into our name, but the original inspiration was the background in space. Today, though, for most people who are interested, we very simply say we invest in rocket ships, and that's why we're called Rocketship.
Love it. Love it.
And so Rocketship uses an ML and AI approach towards identifying startups, right? So you're bringing that expertise from your earlier experiences. So tell us a little bit more about that strategy. What sorts of signals do you look for in startups that this, ML and AI approach is able to facilitate for you?
Absolutely. First, let me start with the team, right? Because as I mentioned before, I think that's one of the most important things to understand in order to take advantage of this approach. One of the things we realized when we started Rocketship was you need people who understand computer science, machine learning, and algorithms from a very fundamental base. Because what's very important in this process to have a very close feedback loop where you build the algorithms find companies, you go talk to these companies, and some of them are going to be great, some of them are not. But then you need to feed that back into the algorithm. So all four of us partners and the two managing partners, Madhu and myself, we're all deep into this algorithm. We really think and understand data, how to take advantage of the data, what kinds of algorithms we want to build, what kinds of companies we want to invest in, and how would we go look for them. And then from there, we have built a team of both investment professionals as well as engineers who together combine and work in a very collaborative fashion to create these next generation of algorithms. And underlying all of that is one of the largest data sets in the world about startup activity. We collect, manage, clean, and process over 470 terabytes of data.
Wow.
This is really large amounts of data. This is not like a set of companies on a spreadsheet that you can do on your laptop. We are talking many, many, many terabytes of data here that you needed to have the backgrounds that we had in managing very large companies and very large data sets in order to work on this. The second and even more significant aspect of this data set is that you need to make it coherent. Because you're collecting so much data, not all of it is in sync. So some of the challenges are collecting all of this data, cleaning it up, making sure you have a coherent data set where all the information about a startup is in one place and it's accurate is a very non-trivial challenge. In fact, some of the Gen AI algorithms that we have in use within Rocketship are actually used in figuring out what the accurate data is. Even a simple thing like what's the founded date of a company is not exactly a fact that you can put your sort of confidence in, because different places have different ideas of what a founded date is. Some people might just look at the first time the company bought their website as the founded date. Second might be an incorporation date. The third could be the date on which the founder changed their LinkedIn profile, saying, I'm the founder of this company. You never know. All of them could be reasonable, right? And you needed to find the right one and the one that you want to standardize on. So we take a lot of this data. We have a lot of information about the company. And then we have this data historically, right? This is not just data that is right now. We have the success histories of successful companies for the last 25 years. And so we then say, let's train a model to identify companies that are similar to those previous success. How does a company look like when it's 1 year, 2 years old, that eventually goes on to become a Snap or a Facebook, or an OpenAI or a Snowflake? There are a vast majority of successful companies, but they all look very different when they were 1 or 2 years old when you make those initial investments. And so our algorithms are trained to identify profiles of companies that look like that at their early stage. And that's what Rocketship's algorithms do. And one other aspect that's important to understand in this is that it's not just one algorithm. We have families of algorithms. So our team members are constantly working on not only large data problems, they're also working on different families of algorithms that allow us to find, consumer companies versus business companies versus SaaS companies versus deep technology companies.
Wow. Okay. That's really fascinating. And I understand that, y'all are still growing your engineering team. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that. Tell us about your team and who's the right fit for this.
We are always looking for amazing talent, and we are definitely growing our team because I think, as you might imagine, the scale of the problem that we're solving is quite large, and there's so much work to do. There's so much fun to be had in trying to find the diamonds in this enormous ocean of data. So we're looking for people who sort of embody for us that true founder culture, where you take a problem, no matter where you are in the stack, whether it be the data side of things, or whether it be the algorithm side of things, or whether it be the investing side of things. We're looking for people who are very self-motivated, self-directed. And then from a technical perspective, can be more flexible. One day you might be working on a data problem, another day you might be working on a brand new machine learning model, and a third day you might be learning from one of the investment team members why a particular company is not a great fit and figuring out what signal might help answer that particular, kind of company and say, this is how we should find a way to find those kinds of companies or eliminate those kinds of companies. So it's a good spectrum of skills, but the core of it underneath is that self-directed, self-motivated, and very strong ability to create and build things. So like I said, we're all builders at heart, the entire team. And so we're looking for people who can build. Software skills, obviously, we are looking for people who pretty much build anything and everything they can in Python, because Python is today the language of most machine learning folks. And so that's what we've been building on. But more importantly, like I said, it's the attitude, the ability to build, and the ability to work on many, many different things from a full stack perspective is what we're looking for.
I love the kind of extended stack nature of the role, right? They get to work on the data side and the ML side. I love the proprietary startup data set, massive as you described. That is, almost 500 terabytes is freaking massive. And then I love the interaction with investment professionals, right? A lot of engineers don't get that type of business exposure in whatever product they're building. So in this case, to get the kind of business output of the technology that you're building, and then to, use that insight to feed it back in to the, whatever you're doing in building, it's cool. your engineers must really love that.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that is one of the biggest draws for our team members. In fact, most of them come, to learn how this entire startup ecosystem works from the inside out.
Yeah.
They're all engineers. They've all heard stories, but it's very different to actually experience it from inside an investor. And so they get to see everything. They get to learn about how successful startups are built, not just from a data and algorithms perspective, but also talking to investment folks. Sometimes we even have our own engineers do diligence on a company. Let's say one of the companies we're looking at is a deep database technology company. So we have one of our engineers on the call to do diligence there and say, hey, let's figure out what the technical issues are. So they get to see so much of how the concept of building a startup, both from the founder perspective as well as the investor perspective work. And in some sense, it's one of the best ways in which they can learn how to build a startup. We have had interns as well as engineers, and most people stay with us. The only reason they would ever consider leaving us is when they decide to go found a startup, right? Because it's almost like I've learned a lot and I've gotten a bit by the bug. And so the only thing left for me to do is go found a startup. And so we are very supportive of our team members who go on to do that. And hopefully their own startups will then be found by our algorithms and we get to invest in it. So that is a true definition of success, right? So we really enjoy what our team members have an opportunity to build alongside.
I love that. So curious, something you mentioned earlier really kind of sparked my curiosity. You mentioned investing globally as a thesis, investing in 14 countries, 22 industries. What's going on in the world out there right now? Like, tell us about some interesting pockets that are forming, kind of who's building what, where. Give us like a bird's eye view of what you're seeing out there.
Oh, I don't think we can fit all of that in one podcast because I think one of the advantages that we have as an investor is we have that global perspective. We can see a lot of what's going on in different places and find ways to take advantage. But I'll say a few things that I think will illustrate this that maybe most of your listeners may not be fully aware of, unless you're in the space. So obviously everybody knows, and you mentioned this as well, this whole Gen AI explosion has happened here in the US. And the US is still at the forefront of a lot of the Gen AI work that is being done all over the world. And part of that is also because of the cost, but part of that is also because there is this large amount of talent here that already knows a lot about these models and could quickly sort of pivot to building here. But what your listeners may not be fully aware of is that that entire process actually is segmented into multiple waves or multiple parts, if you will. There's this original wave that started, which is all about very, very large models. And that has now come to reside in very, very large companies, Meta, Google, Microsoft, and so on. So it's very hard to compete with those companies in building those very large models because training a model is anywhere between $10 and $50 million, and it's not very easy to do.
Yeah.
There are a few folks who are trying to compete, but I think it's a very challenging area to be working in, and there's only a handful of players, if you will. The second sort of layer or pocket of companies has to do with companies building technologies that assist in this wave. They are creating tools, they are creating all kinds of features and so on. And vector databases, Pinecone, for example, testing companies that validate what are the results of these various Gen AI companies. The third segment is where the beginning of the exciting sort of transformation that Gen AI is bringing is beginning to be seen, where Gen AI is being interspersed into real problem solving in a wide variety of industries. Take oil and natural gas industry. Maybe there is a way by which you can have Gen AI help do diagnosis of those outdated pipelines and plants and so on. And very rare to have those kinds of experts be available at your beck and call. But Gen AI is able to do that because it can read all the manuals, it can read all the drawings and whatnot and give you much better examples. But the fourth segment, which is the one I think the listeners are not so much aware of, is till now we've been talking about these large models, but the alphabet of those large models is just text. Like text, maybe images, and so on. But this fourth pocket is where now the alphabet itself has changed. How would you use a large language model in genetics? How would you use a large language model in the real world where the individual alphabet is motion, movement, right turn, left turn, forward, backward, up, down. So once you start changing the alphabet, you open up whole new fields where you can build these new models. And that's what's actually the most exciting thing that's happening in Gen AI in the Valley today. That's super exciting. In terms of geography, there's been an explosion of deep technology companies in a country like India. So a lot of people think of India as a provider of software, provider of various outsourcing services, but through a tremendous transformation in the last 5-7 years, where fundamental research, brand new products that are built in India but can be used and consumed by anybody in the world are being built. And India, for example, is going through that transformation where material sciences, new kinds of materials, new kinds of colors, glues, space technology, right? India is now becoming one of the places where the largest number of space-related startups outside of the US starting up in India. So there are both sectoral trends as well as geographic trends that one can see from our algorithm. In the US specifically, we are seeing outside of this Gen AI a tremendous explosion in terms of the kinds of companies in many, many different sectors. Health tech, cybersecurity, to name a couple, seeing tremendous innovation. And perhaps it was a side effect of the pandemic where we couldn't go into hospitals. But then once you can, now the combination of you can be in a hospital and outside of a hospital changes the quality of care. So you could be in a rural clinic somewhere in Nebraska and still want to get the best high quality care. How do you do that? Explosion of new technologies that are allowing that to happen. So a lot of excitement. This is just the beginning of that explosion. That part of me as an investor is super excited because this is the best time to be an investor, because anything and everything we're looking at is poised for just taking off and exploding. So if there's anybody out there who wants to come join us, this is absolutely the right time. The only thing that can beat what we are doing is building a company yourself.
Yeah.
And if you don't know enough or want to learn about building a company, come join us, learn how to build a company with us, and we'll be more than happy to support you as you go out and build that company yourself.
Yes.
I love that. I love the continued rocket ship analogies as you kind of talk about the space and what you're seeing.
What I find so fascinating about this is that you get to see what's going on before it's already a big thing. Like you're going to see it in its early stages. And I think that that's so cool because typically when you find out about these things, it's already taken off. It's too late. This is early. This is where it's exciting, I think, just to see the trends.
Absolutely. And that edge is not just about us trying to predict where the market is going. Our algorithms show us, and the data-driven way is very, very good at identifying these trends very quickly. Right? Very quickly, we're able to see what's changing and what's not changing. For example, we saw this big move towards climate tech companies very quickly, right? Before even people recognized the fact that climate change was becoming an issue and startups were trying to address it, we saw that trend change. Today, like I said, the Gen AI trends I'm talking about, they're very much visible in our data. We can see the quick shift happening. And then 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months later, some mass market publication announces this as if it was happening then, but it happened now already. You're just seeing the results of it 6 months from now.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's like predicting a little bit like predicting the future of it, in a sense.
I think that's the business of venture.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So, Sailesh, you once mentioned that the best advice you received when starting a company was that the biggest problem you would face would be the people. Can you elaborate a little bit on this advice? How did it shape your approach to building and managing engineering teams and team at Rocketship?
Absolutely. And that still today is the case with respect to that advice. It is still the best advice I've received. And it's also the advice I repeat to pretty much all of our founders as well. And it was offered by one of my fellow partners. So I give him full credit for having offered that advice to me. And it took me a while to understand the full significance of that advice. So what that means is companies are not just an idea or a technology or a business plan. All of that is useless if you don't have the team to execute on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the most important thing that cannot be manufactured, has to be built, is creating that team. And a team is not just these individuals. Team is a group of people who come together, who believe in a mission, who understand the challenges, and find a way to work together to build that company. And that is not something that most of us either are trained to do or know how to do off the boat. Right? Like you may be a great person in terms of technology. You may write the best code out there, or you may be the best salesperson out there. You may know how to sell. But building teams is a very unique skill, and different teams need to be built differently for different kinds of companies. And so that's one of the biggest challenges is in company building. And as an investor in identifying in companies, like, do they have that right team? And the team is also dynamic, right? The team that you start off with when you build the company, starting from your 0 to first or fifth or 10th employee, is different from the team you need in the 100th or the 200th employee, right? Because the scales change, the people's needs change, and so on. And people are very unique in that their challenges are not sometimes easy to understand. Yeah. And so oftentimes you have to have conversations to intuit what some of the problems are. They won't come tell you this is the problem. You have to learn to find a way. You have to have a lot of emotional intelligence. And more importantly, you just have to put in the effort to talk to people in order to understand what some of their challenges are, because these are human beings, right? And so it's very hard. It's not like a bug that you can just go fix by testing and writing code. It's people here, and so you need to find ways to understand what the real issues are and solve for it. And so this is something that I at least find incredibly important, but also incredibly hard to learn. And in fact, the only way I felt I've learned some aspects of this is by building a company and making those mistakes, hiring that person, and then more importantly, having to fire a person because they were not the right fit, but recognizing the right fit or the lack of that right fit, finding a way to let them go in a nice way, because sometimes the fit is just not there. Those are all learning how to encourage people to sort of step outside their own boundaries and excel them. These are all skills that only you can learn by doing. You can't read it in a book. Well, Dale Carnegie's book says a lot of these things, but again, I believe that reading it and doing it are two different things.
Yeah, that's a fact. That's something Alexis and I talk about all the time. Like, we knew going into building firsthand, right? Our company's all about building early engineering teams. So we intimately understand what you're talking about. We went into this knowing it would be hard, but it's been exponentially harder than we even thought it would be. And those founders that are able to kind of get it right have a meaningful difference from a output and success perspective than those founders who continue to struggle or aren't quite able to get there. So I love that you're talking about this philosophy, and that what I heard, it's a meaningful signal in your investment criteria as well.
Absolutely, and like attracts like, right? So you want to go work with the best people out there, and so I think once you start building that kernel, that becomes the attractant to attract more and more good people, which then creates that virtuous success cycle, right? The better people who come in, the better. And I think if I were to point to one company that in its early days did this very, very well, it was Google. Their interviewing process aside, whatever they chose, I think was an overly restrictive definition. And then I think they came to learn that later years. But the fact that they had that high bar for talent and people wanted to go work there, I think created a very virtuous cycle.
+1, and you could see that in repeat pattern at other companies throughout the Valley.
Yeah.
So Sailesh, thank you again for coming on the First 10 Pod. Where can people reach you out in the world? Where are you in the socials? And what would you like to hear from people about? You're looking for startups? You're looking for people? Tell us.
Oh, absolutely. So hopefully startups, our algorithms will find you, but our algorithms are not all seeing. So if you think you're building something amazing, please don't hesitate to drop us a note. Almost all of us at Rocketship are first name at rocketship.vc. So I am Sailesh at rocketship.vc. We are also on LinkedIn. So please feel free to ping us some messages on LinkedIn. And, we are looking for people who are excited by not just software and building things and algorithms and machine learning, but also the investing side, the fact that we're working with startups. Because we've learned that unique combination is what makes a team member very, very successful. So if that is you, please hit us up and we love to chat. Happy to always get a cup of coffee. And if you think you have a business idea, that's also equally exciting for us. We may not be able to invest in you right away, but like I said, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And maybe we'll find out that you are going to be building the next most amazing thing. We make an investment.
Love that. Well, thank you again so much for joining us, Sailesh.
Likewise. My pleasure.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. Do let us know what you thought of our episode on our Twitter or LinkedIn. Look for the links in the show notes. Both Alexis and I are not professional podcasters, as I'm sure you could tell. We just love talking about early stage startups.
And if there's a recruiting related question you'd like answered, or you could use help with anything hiring related, jump on our website. It's www.first10.com. That's 1st10.com. And we'll do our best to get that answered for you.
Thank you so much for staying with us till the end. My name is Boris, and with me is
Alexis Munger.
And we'll see you next time on the First 10 Podcast.
Bye.